camera pans over a mist-choked Georgia swamp at dawn. The air smells of decayed moss and wet earth. A solitary plantation looms, its white paint flaking like peeling skin, shutters rattling in a silent wind. The voiceover pierces the quiet. They said the Harris plantation was cursed. They said the lady of the house never aged, never wept, and that children vanished without trace, yet no one dared speak her name. Cut to the first visual of a hidden room behind the library. Dust motes float in shafts of sunlight, illuminating tiny shackles and faded ledger books filled with names scratched like secrets. The camera lingers on a rusted key, heavy with unspoken stories. This is the story of a family and a town built on horrors they pretended did not exist. The kind of horror that hides in plain sight, behind polite manners, Sunday sermons, and genteel smiles. The narration hints at something unbearable, whispers of abuse, the unnatural blending of bloodlines, and a woman whose obsession with control knew no moral boundary. This plantation is not just a house, it's a tomb of unspeakable deeds. The camera cuts to a silhouette of a child wandering alone, barefoot in the fog, the distant sound of church bells reverberating. Shadows stretch unnaturally long, as if the earth itself remembered every secret carved into its soil. What you are about to witness is not merely history, it is the anatomy of a secret, so monstrous it was buried under centuries of polite silence. And yet, some secrets cannot remain buried forever. The plantation mistress Madeline Harris is introduced through diary excerpts, whispered letters, and recollections from frightened servants. She is beautiful, her hair the color of old honey, her smile sharp as glass. But beneath the charm, she is a predator disguised as a matron. Madeline Harris was a woman who revered control above all. Her dominion extended over the fields, the servants' quarters, even her own children. She believed herself the arbiter of life and death, love and loathing, purity and corruption. Eyewitness accounts tell of her obsession with bloodlines, of how she scrutinized the slaves' children as if conducting some private experiment. Certain children were kept from the sunlight, others punished in ways their parents could barely comprehend. The camera lingers on sketches of faces drawn by a terrified child, faces frozen in silent horror. Symbolic imagery underscores the theme, a cracked mirror reflecting a hand smeared with soot, iron chains shaped like a crown, a jar of preserved organs lined in meticulous order. Every object in the house is a cipher, every artifact a testament to Madeline's insidious influence. Madeline's control was both intimate and omnipresent. Her love was a weapon, her cruelty a scripture, and her ambition a door to darkness that even her own family could not escape. Her sons Nathaniel and Silas are introduced through fragments of memory and town gossip. They are tall, pale, and unnervingly obedient. Yet something about them is often inherited stillness, a lingering shadow in their eyes. Locals whispered that Madeline favored them in ways no mother should, nurturing them as tools rather than children. The boys were both her children and her experiment. She guided them with a precision that blurred love and obsession, care and corruption. They were mirrors of her desires, vessels for her unspoken ambitions, the continuation of a twisted dynasty. As they grow, the plantation becomes their playground and their prison. Servants note the odd rituals, the silent walks at midnight, the intricate carvings on trees, symbols of ownership and secrecy. Nathaniel and Silas are never seen with other children. Their interactions are measured, almost clinical, as though innocence has been dissected and preserved within them. It was in these corridors, under the weight of the mother's gaze, that the line between nurture and nightmare dissolved. The boys did not rebel. They obeyed. They became the instruments of a story the town would pretend never existed. The documentary explores the hidden chambers beneath the plantations, windowless rooms with straw-covered floors, iron rings embedded in the walls, and journals documenting each punishment and lesson. The rooms were invisible to polite society, and yet they were meticulously maintained. Every ledger entry, every chain, every faded smear of blood was catalogued with a devotion that bordered on worship. Archival photographs or their simulated recreations show the stark interiors. The smell of damp earth and fear practically rises from the screen. Servants who dared whisper of the hidden chambers vanish without explanation, leaving only the echo of creaking floorboards and the scent of burnt sage. This house was alive with secrets. It breathed the suffering of those it held, whispered to them in the night, and promised a history no one could ever tell, until now. In the nearby town of Forsyth, whispers moved like smoke. Mothers hushed their children when the Harris family name was mentioned. Clergy spoke of divine punishment and God's justice, but never directly. Town records show missing children, unmarked graves, and strange absences timed with Harris family events. People sensed something was wrong. The air carried a weight too heavy to name. But fear silenced tongues, and fear preserved the lady's secret. An old preacher's diary is read aloud. He recalls meeting Nathaniel, who asked questions no child should know about mortality, about blood, about obedience. Silas, silent, only watched. The diary ends abruptly, the final line smeared with ink, as though the author had been interrupted by something unnatural. Madeline Harris's obsession with power extended into ritual. Every month, servants whispered, she would conduct ceremonies in the basement. Candles lit, symbols drawn in ash, chants that seemed lifted from a language older than the town itself. These were not merely acts of superstition, they were mechanisms of control, weaving fear, obedience, and secrecy into the very walls of the house. Children of the enslaved families were brought here, their innocence harvested like seeds. Some never emerged, others carried the terror with them for the rest of their lives. A ledger discovered decades later contains chilling entries, names, dates, and cryptic codes describing punishments and lessons. The handwriting is delicate, almost loving, yet each note details horrors. It is one thing to read of suffering, it is another to witness its care, as if cruelty were a craft, perfected with devotion. The ledger speaks of the lady's sons, how they were groomed to continue her work, and hints at an even darker purpose, blurring bloodlines to consolidate control, to make obedience hereditary. Survivors of the household recount recurring nightmares, whispers in the night, shadowy figures that mimicked their loved ones, footsteps that were not their own. Their memories are fractured, fragmented by trauma, yet the terror is consistent. To live in that house was to be haunted while awake and asleep, trapped in a perpetual purgatory of fear and obedience. Local ministers spoke of morality, charity, and sin, but they never investigated the Harris plantation. In sermons, they warned against the devil, never naming the true source of evil within their own parish. Complicity can be as damning as the crime itself. The lady attended every service, always in the front pew, her children at her side. Congregants admired her poise, never guessing the darkness behind her smile. The lady's sons began imitating her, echoing her rituals with mechanical precision. They disciplined the younger children, recorded everything in secret journals, and reinforced the cycle of terror. In this household, innocence was a commodity, and the boys were both heirs and enforcers of a nightmare they did not yet fully understand. One autumn night, a young servant girl vanished. No one heard her screams, only a broken shoe was left on the riverbank. Disappearances were never questioned, for the lady's gaze could extinguish even suspicion. Fear was a tangible presence, binding everyone in silence. A secret passage behind the library leads to a series of cells, each meticulously designed. Evidence suggests that the lady's experiments were ongoing, extending to children she claimed as family. The walls remembered, the floors absorbed the cries, and the lady, she walked through it all like a conductor orchestrating an orchestra of horror. The lady orchestrated forbidden unions between enslaved individuals and her own sons. The goal was not only dominance but the creation of a lineage under her control. In her mind, morality was an inconvenience, and power her unassailable birthright. Historical records were manipulated. Deaths were labeled accidents, births went unrecorded. Historians centuries later would find inconsistencies impossible to explain. History itself conspired to hide the truth, leaving only whispers in the wind and shadows in the archives. Nearby orphanages were complicit. Children brought there often ended up on the plantation. Letters hint at payments, threats, and fear used to enforce silence. No place was safe. Even sanctuaries became extensions of the lady's domain. Decades later, a visitor claims to see the lady, unchanged, walking the halls. Her sons appear beside her, frozen in time, their expressions empty. Some secrets refuse to die. Some evils linger long after the perpetrators have gone. Excavations uncover skeletal remains beneath the floors of the main house. Small children, carefully buried, their hands crossed, faces peaceful as if lulled into sleep by terror itself. It is impossible to convey the weight of such a revelation. To see innocence stolen and stored like artifacts of possession is to confront the incomprehensible. Descendants of survivors speak of nightmares, anxiety, and inexplicable fear. Trauma has transcended generations. Horror is not always visible. Sometimes it lives in memory, in behavior, in the shadow of a name whispered long ago. The house stands abandoned, its beauty eroded, but the air remains heavy. Visitors report cold spots, whispers, and fleeting figures. Time does not erase evil, it only dresses it in decay, waiting for those curious enough to look. The documentary ends with the narrator reflecting on complicity, history, and memory. The Harris Plantation is more than a house. It is a mirror of what humans can do when power goes unchecked, when morality is subverted by obsession. The lady and her sons are gone, but the echoes remain. And as long as we forget, the nightmare persists. Fade to black. The final shot is a single key, resting in the dirt. Untouched yet waiting to unlock stories the world was never meant to know.